So what happens when someone visiting the United States breaks the law? It's a question that just got a really powerful answer from the State Department. We're diving into a major new policy that has led to over 100,000 people having their U.S. visas totally canceled. Today, we're going to break down exactly what this policy is, who it's affecting, and why it's all happening right now.
All right, so this policy didn't just pop up out of thin air. It's a pretty significant move by the Trump administration, and it was announced by Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Now, it definitely lines up with their broader focus on immigration enforcement and national security, but honestly, it's the sheer scale of this revocation program that's really making headlines and getting people talking.
And this is the number at the very heart of the story. Over 100,000 visas gone. So what does it actually mean for visa to be revoked? Well, it's an immediate invalidation. Just like that, the person's legal permission to be in the United States is wiped out. This could mean they have to leave the country, maybe even face deportation, and it could stop them from ever coming back. And the official reason given for all of this? Criminal activity.
100,000. That is a massive number. But who are these people really? You know, are we talking about serious criminals, or are folks who maybe made a minor mistake getting swept up in this too? To really get the full picture, we've got to look a little closer at the data.
Okay, so let's just let that sink in for a second. More than 100,000 individuals. To put that into perspective, the U.S. usually gives out over 10 million non-immigrant visas every single year. So yeah, while 100,000 is just a fraction of the total, it still represents a huge and sudden enforcement of policy, way bigger than the kind of routine revocations we've seen in the past.
And here's where we start to see who makes up that 100,000-plus figure. It includes 8,000 student visas and, get this, 2,500 specialized visas. Now, a specialized visa, that's usually for people with very specific in-demand skills. You know, think scientists, engineers, doctors. And the list of activities they're targeting is incredibly broad. It runs from things like DUIs and theft all the way up to assault. But it also includes non-criminal stuff like simply overstaying a visa, which kind of blurs the lines on that criminal activity justification.
Okay, so we've got the what and the who. Now for the big question, the why. The State Department has been very direct about its reasoning, framing this whole thing through the lens of national security. So let's take a look at their official justification. So here it is, the core argument from Secretary of State Marco Rubio. This statement wasn't made in a vacuum, right? It's part of a much wider push for more restrictive immigration policies. When he says the visa system should reflect the national interest, he's really framing this as a corrective measure, something designed to get the system back in line with the administration's security goals.
And he really doubles down on that point here. He frames it not just as a right, but as an obligation. Now, legally speaking, the administration is leaning on some pretty broad authority that was given to the executive branch way back in a 1952 immigration law. It gives the government a lot of room to deny or revoke visas for security reasons. But some legal experts are arguing that using it this broadly might not be constitutional and could end up being challenged in court.
You know, an action this sweeping was definitely going to make some waves, and the public reaction has been anything but quiet or unified. The response, as reported, has split pretty sharply along some very predictable lines, with immigrant rights groups on one side and more conservative organizations on the other.
So let's unpack these two very different takes. On one hand, supporters see this as just common sense safety. They argue the government has a duty to remove non-citizens who commit crimes, and they often point to specific serious cases as proof that a policy like this is long overdue. But on the flip side, critics are calling it a kind of collective punishment. They argue it's totally unfair to penalize thousands for what a few people did, and that it's going to scare away talented students and workers from coming to the U.S., which could end up hurting the country.
So this whole policy really forces us to ask a fundamental question. Is this a necessary, decisive step to make the country more secure, or is it a massive overreach of government power that could have some really serious long-term consequences? You know, beyond the immediate headlines, it's worth thinking about what a policy like this signals to the rest of the world and how it might just shape the future of immigration and travel to the United States.